So Tammy, I have started using the client search feature, and that's pretty helpful. Just last week, managed to schedule that customer success call just because a person from that account was searching for certain items, and it just happened to call the POC, and yeah, it's pretty helpful because even overall, I get a much better understanding that these are the accounts which are searching for something on our software. So it's a really helpful feature.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, there isn't going to be something there every day, but when you find something, I really think it could make a huge difference,
Yep.
in our customer service. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
It's just that, I mean, when I guess we get too many client searches from one particular account, it more or less resonates that someone's actually looking out for something. So in those instances, it's really helpful if we capture that information and contact them.
Good. Okay, great. Hey, Karan, I see you just got here. How are you?
All good, Tammy. How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you.
Congratulations
All right,
on the new house.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure.
A lot of work. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to Master Files Corporation. I'm going to hit Modify. And this week we're going to do Corp Info 2. Is that right? Corp Info 2 screen. Yes, that's right. Corp Info 2. Okay. So I've already set this up. I realized that in our previous training, I was doing it in my test environment. I wasn't doing it in my live site. So I've come in and I've already set settings the way that I like them to be. So starting on the left up top, reports net amount formula. So what this means is when you run reports, you can see it in different ways. The default is gross amount minus discount plus tax plus freight. But you can choose any of these options here. Now, I'll just let you play with these and run the reports so that you can see the difference. But just be aware that if you're talking to customers and they want to know, well, if you're showing them something and they look at it and they say, well, we don't do it that way, can we change it? This is where you're going to come to see what your options are. Gross amount plus tax, plus, freight, any of these different options. I haven't had anyone ever want to change this, but I've heard people ask about it. Maybe current customers who wanted to see something different. So it's just important to be aware that this is possible. Oh, we did do this last week, didn't we? Did we do this last week?
Yeah.
We did.
Yep.
I'm looking at my
because I was I'm just checking the invite as well. Yep.
Okay, let me pause the recording. Hang on one second. Okay, so this week we're going to go to the Req Info tab, and this is where everything requisitions is. So starting at the top left, any email alerts that are set in EPMX are set right here. So you can notify your users if when a requisition is approved, and this is where that happens. If there's a check mark in here, then they'll receive the notification. You can also notify them when the requisition is ordered. You can attach a copy of the PO to the email alert. So if you're the buyer, when you save that order, the requisitioner will receive the email along with a copy of the PO. And what this does is it reduces the necessity for you requisitioners to constantly be reaching out to buyers or managers and asking them, where's my order, where's my order? So when the requisition is received, if it's received by a warehouse, this is a good option to have as well. So that way the requisitioner knows it's in the warehouse, they can go pick it up. We always have to have a check mark in here if they have requisitions approvals turned on, because we need EPMX to email the buyer once the requisition has been approved. So if we don't have a check mark in here, then those email notifications to the buyer will not go out. There's several different ways we can notify the buyer. Why do I feel deja vu again? Is this deja vu? Did we do this again already too?
Nope. I think.
No, not this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I must be straddling realms today and feeling deja vu a lot here.
It's the new house.
Yeah. Gosh. I'm moving one thing at a time. Hopefully this weekend I get a lot done. Okay. All right. So you do have to notify EPMX who the buyer is, so that they receive the notification. Now, there's several ways to do that. If you have a check mark in here and you've got the buyer identified via the commodity code or in the material file, then it isn't necessary to pull anything into here. However, most of our customers don't use that method. And so what I recommend is that they use a shared email address. So purchasing at bellwethercorp.com. If you have a few buyers, or even if you only have one, you could share that email so that whoever their backup is has access to it when they're out. You're going to create the user in the employee file, and you're not going to assign any modules to it. It's going to be simply a user so that you can pull the email address in here, and it does not affect their licensing. Okay, so once that's complete, then here's where we tell EPMX to go ahead and auto number the requisitions. Again, I know I've mentioned this before, I like to start everybody out at 1,000. No one has opposed that, so that's generally our standard practice right now. I haven't ever had anyone say, I need to manually create requisition numbers myself. So, but if they needed to, they could. We would just uncheck this and we would let them auto create them when they generate the requisition. Now, delivery date is delivery date. You can either do not calculate. This shows up on the requisition screen, which means you have to manually go in and enter a date using that calendar icon, or you can set it to autofill for today's date plus however many number of days. My standard is 5, and I'm fine setting this for most customers because they can override it when they create a requisition. They can change it if they want to. Requisitioner default is user. This means whoever logs in as the requisitioner, their name will fill in on that requisition document and they won't be able to change it to anyone else. So this is important to know because sometimes we have customers who say, well, we have an administrator who's going to be putting in requests for other people, for our engineers, and it needs to follow the engineer's approval hierarchy instead of the administrators. In that case, we would uncheck this and we would allow them the ability to choose the requisitioner. Okay, but most of the time there's a check mark in here. Copy requisition instructions to the PO. You know what the instructions are in the requisition. So on the left side are the instructions, on the right side are the notes. If you want them to be copied over into a purchase order, there has to be a check mark here. Okay. Anytime you create a new requisition, if you want those notes to automatically be populated in that document, you would put a check mark here for both of those.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So copy requisition attachments to new requisition. So when you are creating a requisition from another requisition, so you know that menu option in there, requisitions from previous orders or previous requisitions,
Right.
you have the ability to have the attachments auto fill in your new document for you. So that's what this setting is for. They say, we have this legal disclosure that has to be attached to every request that we put in. That's fine, we can do that for you. We can configure it to do that for you. I don't think these are important. These don't really have anything to do with anything that you guys are going to be selling. But let me take a look at help because I don't remember what they are for. So let's go down to material items. Let's go down to the next one. There isn't anything in help about it either. I don't know if this is the right help. Hang on one second. It probably isn't. Here it is. When selected, material items will be available for requisitions. When turned off, only ad hoc items. Okay, and punch out items. Okay, so you know what this would be? If your customer asks if they can restrict orders to only punch out, or everything has to be ad hoc. And we only have one customer who does that, and no one limits to POs only. I mean to POs, by POs I mean punch outs. But some people do use only ad hoc items, and a lot of time that ties to them not being able to get together a material file. We have one customer who's never been able to get a material file together, and they really don't care, and they've been with us for several years. So that's where you would set that configuration for material items. So by default, it's checked. That means they have access to material items. So if you uncheck it, you won't have access to the items in the material file. And this is site-wide. So it isn't by user. This isn't what I would recommend by user. I would use catalog security for users, which we'll talk about later. Suggested vendors catalog only will give your users only the suggested vendors catalog when you're doing some searches in requisitions. All right, and you can play around with that too, but I don't have anyone who uses that. We use catalog security most of the time. Okay, so what this does here, the record locking for purchase orders, sometimes companies have multiple buyers. Sometimes they'll have, 2 or 3 or 4 buyers. You only want one person at a time accessing those files because you don't want them to be able to create duplicates of the same item, right? Then you end up with 2 orders for the same thing. So this configuration here locks that so that that can't happen. Okay. In the vendor file, we have the ability to enter the vendor's currency. And if you want EPMX to represent that vendor's currency in the requisitions, then you would put a check mark here. Okay. Some of this we're just not even ever gonna, you're never gonna touch. So I'm just gonna skip over the things that really aren't applicable anymore. All right, so any questions about any of this over here on the left-hand side?
Nope, all good.
Okay. So approval options on the upper right-hand side. I know we briefly covered this before when we were in the PO approvals, but you have 5 different approval methods. And the best way to become familiar with them, or anytime there's a question about it, is to come to help from that page, and there's a chart. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but it gives you a really good description of exactly what it does. Each approval method does. Okay. Mm-hmm. Our most commonly used is minimum hierarchy. Okay.
Okay.
Back here now. Okay, so not all customers buy inventory, so not all customers need stock requisitions. But if they do have inventory and they want to use stock requisitions, it's optional. They have the option to set the same level of approval for stock requisitions. However, most companies, all of the companies I've worked with, choose no approvals for stock requisitions, but they do have several options again, and they're outlined exactly the same as the regular requisition approvals. You can if you want stock requisite, no cost stock, if you have approvals turned on for stock requisitions and you want the no cost stock requisitions to be automatically approved, you would do that by putting a check mark here. All right, so if I put minimum hierarchy, then I can put a check mark here, and anything that has no cost associated it will auto approve. You can approve requisitions by two methods, by line item or by total. Most customers choose by line so that it doesn't hold up the entire requisition. However, we do have some customers who want everything approved at once. So POs from requisitions, if the requisition line is approved, then they can select it when they're creating a PO. So if you've chosen requisition line item approval, then you would choose select if rec line is approved. But if you chose approved by requisition total, then you're going to come down here and change it to approved so that it's cohesive, so that everything is in alignment. Okay, I'm going to change this back. Disable auto approve. I think we talked about that a little bit in POs. I often disable this so that users are forced to log into EPMX and take a look at the notes or the attachments. But if ever we can make that available for whatever reason, then we can do that for customers. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of details about this unless you guys have experienced questions or scenarios about this, but I just want to give you an overview. These restrictions here are generally used when you're creating a corporation. I'm going to give you Excel Site Rentals as an example. Excel Site Rentals has one corporation. They do not have a multi-corp setup in EPMX. However, they have 3 locations. They have their main office, they have a Michigan warehouse, and they have a PA warehouse. So we could have set them up with more than one corporation, but we decided not to for several reasons. So in that scenario, if Tanya says to me, I don't want Pennsylvania being able to see what Michigan is doing, then I would use these permissions here to restrict access to all users so that they could only see their own information in EPMX. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, now you can also set some exceptions to those restrictions. So anytime this scenario comes up for you guys, it should always be, we have the ability to set restrictions and we can set some exceptions. We'll do some testing for your exact scenario so that we can show them how it works. Okay. I think Excel Site Rentals is the first one that I may have to use these for since I've been here, but I know Jeannie has used it a couple times in the past. In order to see budgets, you have to have budget control turns on, and this is the same exact options that are in the Corp Info 2, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. Okay, it's the same exact thing. Now, if you're going to be using punch-out, then you have the option to allow punch-out items and non-punch-out items to be entered into one requisition. I don't know why they would want to do that, but I'm guessing one person had to have it that way, and so we created this configuration. However, we rarely use this. Most people say, no, I want punch-outs to be separate from everything else, in which case we leave this unchecked. In EPMX, you do have to tell it to turn on stock requisition by putting a check mark here, or else it will not show up in your menu options up here under requisition. Okay, right here. So this configuration will literally stop you from being able to see it in your menu here. Now, allow change to stock requisition unit of measure. If anybody should ever say, well, if I'm creating a stock requisition and I need to change the unit of measure. Can I? If you want it to be that way, we can configure it that way. Another thing that you can do is for requisitions is you can automatically pull in one GL account code for all requisitions. I don't know anybody who does that, but should the topic ever come up, can we do that? Yes, we can. We can do that in the corporation record on the Req Info tab. Okay. We can also, and we've talked about this before, we can also pull in one GL account code for everything for the corporation.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay. So, is there anything new you learned this week?
Yeah, I guess the restrict access thing was something I wanted to know how that happens. So that's a good new learning.
Okay. Okay, great. Most of the other stuff you guys have heard, and it just comes naturally to you probably because that's the way you learned EPMX.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the way your site was set up for you. So it just became kind of, innate. So, okay, well, I'm going to go on to receiving because receiving is going to be very quick, and there's no sense in setting up a whole meeting about it. And then what we'll do is we'll do AP and contracts, and then we'll do inventory. So over here on receiving, you can set standards for your vendors based on when items are received. And again, we do have customers who are interested in this, and we have a few that are using it, but most of our customers do not use it. Your vendors are often chosen in large corporations based on their performance, and this is a way to monitor their performance. We placed an order, we requested it be delivered on this date, the vendor agreed, when did it actually show up? And then EPMX will do some calculations to show you your vendor's performance. Did they give us what we needed? Did they give us what we expected? So this gives you the ability to drill down on multiple vendors through running reports to see what their performance was and decide if you're going to continue to do business with them, right? So this is mostly something that a large company would use. Smaller companies tend to build relationships with their vendors and they work out issues, but it is available if anyone is interested or if they ask about it. Restrict PO modifications on completely received lines. I don't know why this says no restrictions. Okay, but I think it's self-explanatory. So if you receive an item, do you want your users, your warehouse folks, generally speaking, to be able to go into that PO and modify that PO after it's been received, or anyone else, your buyers? That's the question that would be asked here in determining which option to take. But you can have no restrictions for all users, or only for selected users, right? Now, looks to me like it's tied to, because it says with selected exempt users. So you can choose who you want to exempt and who you don't want to exempt. I've never used this before. So if anything ever came up and you said, oh, wait a minute, we have this one scenario, we'd have to test it and see what it would do. Okay. Again, over here, your evaluation weights. These are the standards that you can establish. These are the number of days. I think the price is a percentage, the quantity is a number, and the delivery is a number of days, period, for analyzing your vendor's performance. The display options is what do you want to see? What do you want to see in your receiving? Do you want to see quantity ordered, quantity received? Maybe you don't want them to see what you actually ordered. You only want them to see what you received. I don't know why you would want to, but these are the defaults, so it just always stays this way. Again, receiver default is user. I think you guys probably know what that is by now. We don't necessarily want people to log in to the receiving module and receive for other people. Do it in your own name. That way there's accountability, right? So if something's missing, then we know who did it, and we can go straight to them and find out what happened. Receipt required. So why would you get the receiving module if you don't want a receipt, right? You wouldn't. So if you don't get the receiving module for any reason, let's say Jam Cellars. I know you guys have probably heard me talk about Jam Cellars, that winery that I spent a ton of time with over the past year, and now they want to cancel. They said they have a new accountant, and they say we can't do what they want. Well, for them, they only bought the purchasing and the invoicing module. In order for you to be able to invoice something, you have to receive it. So if you don't purchase the receiving module, then you're never going to be able to fully close your purchase order. You're always going to be able to modify it. And for Jam Cellars at the time, they didn't care about that. Now they do, because now they see what that actually means. So I think it is important to understand what this means. If you uncheck this, that means that you can create a purchase order, you can get it approved, and then you can invoice it. It'll be available to be invoiced. Because you told EPMX the receipt isn't required. If you leave this in and you don't have the receiving module and you go to invoice it, if it hasn't been received, then the PO isn't going to show up for you to invoice. Does that make sense? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Could you yeah? Can
Yeah,
you
I
come
know it's a
again? I
lot.
mean,
Okay, so there's triggers in EPMX throughout the software where if I do this, when I create a requisition, it triggers an email for an approval. When I approve it, it triggers an email to the buyer and to the requisitioner. It's been approved, and the buyer can convert it to a PO, right? One of the triggers that happens in EPMX is a receipt triggers the availability of that PO to be accessed to create an invoice. Are you with me on that one?
yeah. Yep.
Okay. So if okay, well, we'll leave it at that for now, but you'll think about it, and when it comes up, we'll talk about it again. But that's what happens. So this setting right here, receipt required, if you uncheck it, then you can bypass the receipt, and then it'll make the PO available to invoicing. Okay. So that's the short version of what it does. Let's just leave it at that for now. Okay. So if you uncheck it, then a receipt isn't required, but by default, a receipt is required in order for a PO to be able to be accessible to be invoiced. Otherwise, it doesn't show up in the queue. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Invoice entry. Right here. Here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So is it like a prompt? I mean, sometimes you do get that prompt that in order to access the other function, we need to complete one task. So is that something on those lines? Like you have to, unless and until you check that, you wouldn't be able to access the invoice entry function. Am I making sense here?
You can access the inventory module and all of it, but when you go to create, let me just start a batch here. Okay, so when you go to create an invoice, if you haven't received it in EPMX, your PO number will not be here. There'll be nothing here. It won't show up.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
So it's important when you're selling or when you're working with customers to understand that if they're like, well, what do we need the receiving for? We don't do it anyway. Well, okay, maybe you don't need receiving, but if you're going to invoice and you want to bridge into your software, then you kind of have to have receiving. Or if they don't care, that they'll always be able to modify the purchase order, then we can come in here and we can uncheck receipt required.
Oh, okay.
Then they
Got
can
it.
have the purchase. Okay.
Yep, no, it's clear.
So you don't have to know all of the details about how that works, but just an overall understanding so that you're not misguiding customers, because that's really what happened here with jam sellers. You know, Ben didn't fully understand that by not having the receiving module for jam sellers, they were always going to be able to modify that purchase order. In EPMX, when you create a PO and you receive it and then you invoice it, when you invoice it and then you perform the invoice bridge and you finalize that process, you can no longer modify anything in EPMX. Nothing. You can't change the invoice, you can't change the receipt, you can't change the PO or the requisition.
Okay.
So without a receipt, you lose that protection. That means anybody can go in and change the PO and resubmit it to somebody and buy something. And you'll never know because our audit trail sucks. We don't have one. We have an audit trail. So that's why the receiving module it's a really important step. And if anybody ever objects because of cost or anything else, or time, it's just our people aren't going to do it. It's so simple. You guys know how simple it is to do a receipt. It is so simple. It takes 2 seconds once you're used to doing it. And that's what I tell people.
Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay. Let's see. These are just some other things that you guys, can the buyer receive a notification when the PO is received? Yes. We would put a check mark in here if the buyer wants to be notified. Most of the time they don't, but we can notify them if for some reason their standard operating procedures require it. Do you want to be able to filter your PO receipts by ship to code? Yes, we can do that too. We can disable auto receive, and I often do this when I set up a site because same reason as approvals. You guys know this. I know you can come up with a scenario. I'm at a warehouse, I'm opening a box, and there's 5 items, and I've got 12 boxes to open, and it's almost time for me to go home. So I'm just going to auto receive everything. This is it. Well, maybe one of those boxes was missing equipment, right?
Right.
So you most of the time don't want your users to be able to auto receive, but it's an option if they do want them to do it. You can also default, just like you can default the delivery date, you can default the ship to date to today's date, whatever today is. And I don't recommend that because if you're setting up these vendor performance metrics, you want them to record the actual date the items came in. Maybe they were delivered yesterday, but you're recording it today because you didn't get to it yesterday. So I always leave this open for people, but it's an option. And the final option is, do you want to be able to print a ticket or barcode labels through your receiving process? So when you receive something, receiving material receipt, and you pull in the PO and you receive it, EPMX can print a ticket for you, or you can choose to print a barcode and then slap the barcodes onto the items as you put them on the shelf. Okay. And here again, it's just another configuration for calculating the delivery performance for the vendors. You have original delivery date and revised delivery date. All right. So I know that's a lot, and I really try to get through these 2 tabs as quickly as I can because I've got some stuff going on. But if you guys have any questions or anything at all that you want to go over or talk about with respect to either of these 2 tabs or anything else, then the floor is open.
Oh, it's pretty clear, Tammy. This receiving part was pretty helpful. No questions from me.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm good too, Tammy.
Okay, great. Then I will let you go, and I'll go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I have a separate question. Maybe that would be covered in some other section. Maybe it's pertaining to the reporting actually. The question which the customer from Owensboro, David, he wanted to check if we could add the exact physical date of receiving an item on the form instead of the expected delivery date. So that was, I'm assuming that's his current query. So we could take that up anytime later as well. But that I was keen to know how is that possible, and what exactly is he referring to when he talks about that?
I remember having a conversation with him about that. Give me a second to take a look here. I'll pull up my notes. Karan, you can go, and I know you have other commitments. Kathy agreed to cover for you while we do these sessions, so I don't want to keep you for much longer.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Tammy.
Okay, you're welcome.
I'll jump off. Thank you. Bye, Aiden.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
You too, Tammy. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, so let me try and find it here. Let's see. Bellwether, account management, Owensboro Green. I think here's my notes. Okay. Let me see if I can remember. I think I showed him some reports where he could get what he wanted, but let me just refresh. Warehouse clerk, Matt Burke received using min-max stocking locations good. Issues are required to sign out sheet. Matt enters items throughout the day. Okay, so these are some of his issues. Item code used is the equipment number. Yeah, they have their site reconfigured, global dictionary renamed, and it's really hard to remember what they've done. So first two numbers of the location remaining for. And I don't have any notes about this, so I think I probably just resolved it right away for him.
Okay.
So what does he want to see? He wants to see if I can remember the standard PO.
Right. To have an ability to if we have the capability of knowing the exact date of physically receiving an item. So instead of the delivery date, because that's the date when we are expecting them to deliver. If there's any way that we can get the exact date of receipt on that report itself. So Vinny did mention that you can capture that information in another report, but I'm guessing he wants to have that information in the PO. Is there any report in which we can identify that X item was a purchase order was sent out on this particular date, and the items were received on this date? Is there any report that helps us know that?
So the PO number is here. Oh, here, I know what to do. I don't know if you have this, but I'll send it to you. I haven't updated it, so if there's been any new reports created, they might not be on here, but hang on one second.
Sure.
So whether new client package, implementation. Okay, so I have this spreadsheet called EPMX reports list. And what I did was, because the CSV files give you so much more information, I went to every single menu option and I listed every single report, right? So here's for asset manager. Well, let's go to receiving. Let's look at that one instead. So here's the receiving tab, and here's the reports. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 reports in receiving available. Okay. Everything in green on every line is, hang on, tie it in for you. Reports, AP receiving reports. Everything in green here on the spreadsheet is what's here. These are your filter options.
Okay.
So when someone says, can I run a report based on PO number and or the receiving report, you say yes, because there's PO number, and then here, it's here, okay? It tells me right here. Everything in blue is what prints out on the CSV report.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'm going to send this to you, but here's what he wants to see. So he wants the receiving date, an actual receive date. So
Right.
these are his filters. So what I do is I come in here and I hit Control F, and then I type some keywords like I'll put date, and then I'll do I only want this line, receiving report, date, find all. Okay. Well, it's not working for me, my Excel, but it's got the order date, which would be the PO date. There you go.
Perfect.
And
right.
And then it gives you the date received over here somewhere because I saw it. And if you want to track when it was supposed to be here, then you could set up those configurations that we talked about today.
Correct.
But it looks to me like your receiving report is going to give you the order date and the date received. So that's probably what I did. I probably ran that report and showed it to him. But he's retiring, so he's only half.
Right. Right. Got it. So yeah, I mean that's exactly what he wanted to see. So I think this report does serve that purpose. Perfect. Yep. I wanted to check if there's a way to find that out. Brilliant. Yep. That should be great.
Yeah, and I probably told him that already, but like I said, he's 1 foot out the door. All right, I'm going to send this to you right now so you have it.
Sure.
Aiden,
Sure. That'd be helpful.
Reports. All EPMX reports and CSV display fields. All right, where is reports? Okay, now we don't add reports every day, but there could be a couple things missing. If somebody did a custom work, like through support, if they said, can you add this field to this report and no one told me about it, then I haven't updated that yet.
Okay. I mean, at least I can gauge the crux of it. Like I now have an understanding on what we can expect from a particular receiving report. Yep. That should be more than helpful. Yep.
Okay. And I use that during sales calls a lot because I've helped Ben and Kathy quite a bit over the past several years. And anytime I'm on a call with a customer, then I just say, well, let's take a look at the report, because you and I cannot be expected to memorize every single field that's on every single report. That's just too much data.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
you. Thank you so much. No, that should be. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, great. You're doing a great job, Aiden. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night. Take care.
Have a great weekend.
Yep. Bye.
Bye now.